the East Kern Water District. Thanks to John Joyce, who contacted me and put me in contact with Dwayne Chisolm, who's the Assistant General Manager for AVEK. I'd like to welcome you here to kind of give us an update as to what's new with AVEK.
Thank you for having me here, and I'm going to give a short presentation about a few things and leave some time for questions. I'm sure you have plenty of questions. First off, my name is Dwayne Chisolm. I've been working for AVEK for about 18 months. I have about 30 years of experience in very small to medium-sized communities, so this is a very familiar forum for me for various types of things. Worked primarily in the water, wastewater, public utility areas, but have done a little bit of regional planning and some other things through the course of the career. First, I wanted to mention that Director Weissenberger, who represents this area, regrets that he could not attend the meeting tonight. He's planning to attend, but he does teach on Wednesday nights at the college, so he was able to attend. Just a little bit of background about AVEK for those that may not be familiar with it. AVEK was created in 1959. It was primarily to get an allocation from the State Water Project that was going through during those periods in the early 60s. AVEK is a water wholesaler. In other words, we acquire water from the State Water Project and then pass those costs on to water retailers who provide the retail water to the various service areas within AVEK. AVEK is approximately 2,400 square miles. It's a very huge district. There is the actual service area that we provide, where we actually provide water to retailers within that. It's very small compared to the total area. And I'm sure one of the questions that I'm going to get asked here, so I thought I'd just try and address it right from the very beginning, is what am I getting for my taxes paid to AVEK? Okay, and I can understand why you might ask that question. And essentially what the answer is you're getting access to the State Water Project. And this was a decision that was made back in the 60s to include this area within the AVEK service area, and there was an election during that period, and the majority decided to form AVEK. You can argue today as to whether that was a good idea or not a good idea to include this particular area, but it is within there. Just as I indicated, though, there are many property owners within the service area that don't receive direct water supplies from AVEK or through retail. For such a large district. For example, the other question would be, how could Agua Dulce receive water from AVEK? They would need to provide a water retailer or a water retail operation to retail water to the various customers that would be within the area. And how could this be accomplished? Well, you can do it through a mutual water company, a community services district, annexation into the county waterworks district that's over in Acton. You can try and contract with an investor-owned utility that may come in and actually be willing to put in the capital that's necessary to facilitate such a venture. But as you're probably aware, there are some considerable obstacles to providing water to this area. First off, there's, from what I can tell, there's no distribution system that exists today. Most everybody's on private wells and provides their own water service. There would be a significant investment to extend the pipeline, the AVEK pipeline that's up on Sierra Highway, to extend it that length. And then one thing to consider too is that a retail provider would need to have a consistent income for a certain amount of customers. And to do that, they have to phase out some of these private water systems in order to get customers. So you're really looking at a long-term proposition if you're going to try and develop, water system in here that would be serviced through AVEK in some fashion. So the other thing to mention is your topography is such that it'll be a somewhat complicated water system because various zones, there are various zones, and you'd have a lot of pumping plants and pressure reducing valves, other types of things. It's not like you're going to the bottom of the desert where it would be the same level and relatively simple. So you're thinking about the presentation today, I was wondering, given all these obstacles, what is it that Dr. Dulce Town Council could do, and or at least consider in order to, because if I was living here and the things I was thinking about were, I want to make sure that there's enough water today, that there will be enough water tomorrow, that we don't grow ourselves into a problem where we don't have enough water or it affects the water. And, make sure that the water quality is well maintained over a long period of time. And so one of the ways you might be able to do that would be through some kind of groundwater management program. In other words, a system where you would develop possibly a series of studies that could, I don't know what's out there today, but given the area here, you could kind of take a look at the hydrology, the geology of the area, look at an idea about what everybody's using, and you can get especially if you had a monitoring program to get an idea of what levels were, whether they were increasing or decreasing over time. You can kind of judge and make some decisions with regards to how much water should be coming in and how much water should be coming out.
So how much would it cost and how long would it take to get water to Agua also?
How much would it cost? Well, you're talking probably, I'm just going to give you some ballpark ideas. Running up that area, you're probably talking 200 million, 300 million. By the time you try and develop a distribution system that would come into the area, set that up. The pipeline is probably if you had a distribution system here, the pipeline to get it here is probably not so bad. The biggest issue is the fact that you would be having to set some kind of distribution system up. And then on top of that, you need to have some kind of, whether it's a community service district or some other organizational amenity to serve the customers and take care of meters and, install the water lines, the tanks you would need to do that. And then you got to convince the public that, that paying all that money through some kind of tax scenario is in their long-term best interest going ahead and doing that.
Have you ever seen a community do a community recharge project where they actually took your water and injected it into the ground table, the water table, to raise the water level of the local wells?
Sure.
Okay. Is that what they do up in Tehachapi?
I don't know if they do it to Tehachapi, but essentially that's what AVEK's doing with their water bank. It's nothing different than that. You can certainly recharge, take raw water, that would be available. Unfortunately, it's a treated water line, but
right.
Irregardless, you would take water and be able to spread it in some fashion, or use injection wells, where you actually inject it into certain areas. That's where you kind of have to really know the lay of the land, where the water is, where it stays. And I can tell you, just without doing a whole lot, doing very little to no research on your geology, I imagine it's pretty complicated up here, just looking at the soils and things. So.
Yeah, it's hit and miss,
Yeah.
a lot of areas, but there are some areas that tend to have shallow water and plentiful water.
Right,
and
right.
As we see those, oddly enough, in those particular areas, there isn't a whole lot of drawdown in the wells. And that was my thought. Well, if somehow, let's say for example, up on toward the boiling point, which is a high point on Sierra Highway before we drop into Acton.
Right.
Up there used to be wells that were 60 and 80 foot deep excess of 200 gallons a minute, and the water was 40 feet from the surface. Well, now they're dry.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if those were to get injected or filled
Right.
back up,
Right.
where would that water trickle out to? That we don't know.
We don't know.
But,
yeah.
and I know, and I heard that in Tehachapi, there, in some of the development area there, they actually inject the water to keep the water table for the local wells stable.
Right.
And I don't, obviously, this is all new to us. We don't really even know what question to ask.
Well, it's
other than to get information.
right. I mean, like I say, the biggest portion of the cost is associated with the distribution system in a traditional scenario. If you're talking about recharging certain areas where, and you can figure out the mechanism in which to do that, that would certainly make a lot of sense for you to move forward with in some kind of project that, you still have to do all the geology work, and you got to do all the monitoring, and it's going to cost something to do that. But definitely, if you can make it work, you can get the proper program together. There's nothing that would protect that. There's no reason why it wouldn't work.
Okay, it's just a matter of figuring out who would benefit, which wells would come up faster.
True.
That's the unknown.
True.
So,
and not everybody would likely benefit equally. So how do you do the assessment? Because you're going to have to assess in order to be able to cover the cost of the project.
Okay.
In the bigger picture, with the entire West being in a drought, where is your water coming from?
Our water right now comes from the Feather River watershed above Lake Orville, is where our water originates from, and where the water for the State Water Project comes from. It then comes down the Feather River through the Delta, when everything's right, we're not releasing water from the fish, and then it gets pumped through that canal that comes right down I-5, which we all see, and the canal goes through the Middle Valley. So that's where the water comes from. And then we get it directly from the canal, run it into a treatment plant, and then we have a distribution system that distributes that water to our various retail customers.
Do you have any bank water?
We do.
From where and where is it?
It's the banked water is in the Antelope Valley. It's in a water bank that AVEK created, started back in 2006. We had approximately 35,000 acre-feet of water in that bank over a couple of wet years. And this year we're using the vast majority of that to meet our customers' needs, because we have zero allocation this year coming from the State Water Project. It's the third driest year on the record by a lot. So, we're right there with 1928, 1977 with regards to how dry it is. So. And in those periods, we didn't have the same pumping restrictions on the Delta, which makes it even more difficult for water.
So, President, what is that, those 300 homes by, I think it's Sierra Vista on close to Boarding Point? Those homes going in there, what's that project called?
Casulas?
Yeah. Those 300 homes are supposed to be AVEK. How would the water come to those homes, for instance?
I'm not completely.
Like when you said the 200 million to bring water here, that's pretty much here. That's not what Dulce said.
Yeah, but that line, the county restricted, or AVEK, somebody put a restriction on the size line they were able to follow that project, so that they couldn't be continued on into Agua Dulce.
Because that wouldn't be sufficient to come to Agua Dulce after that, because that's right in the 8,000 block of Sierra.
Yeah, well, it probably would be, but the tanks and the pumping stations reducing, all the grid it's more than just a pipeline getting to going down Sierra Highway. It's a matter of where does this water go to other than just through this pipe, and that's normally it's set up. You'll see different zones where they have storage tanks at different levels so that they don't blow the pipes apart.
And you can have fire flow when you need it, because you use the gravity in order to provide.
Because that development in and of itself wouldn't support a $200 million cost.
No, I think his cost was around $10 million for him to bring the water, for his portion of cost to get water for that project, I believe was around $10 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, because I think it was about 10 miles, and he said it was $1 million a mile.
Something like that.
So if we have 2 more dry years like this year, and your bank is gone, then what are you guys gonna do for water?
Well, for right now, we would use the groundwater basin in the Agua Valley has a considerable amount of water in it that we can utilize to meet, the minimum health and safety needs that we have. So that's where we would end up trying to get our water. Most of the retailers within Antelope Valley have their own well systems, so they run most of those. Basically what AVEK provides is that peaking capacity during the summer period. And so we would be able to provide that peaking period. The vast majority of the water that's pumped is pumped by the retailers, not by AVEK itself. We just do it.
Question in the back.
Yeah, about 8 or 9 years ago, there was a presentation in Acton by AVEK. And at that time, they figured, I think we figured 3,000 parcels in Agua Dulce, give or take. It was figured at a 20-year assessment, properties, parcel assessment. And using, let's say we bumped it up to 300 million, just to make it easier, round figures, about 5,000 a year in 20 years per parcel. Is there 2 questions? So I'm bringing it into a point of 2 questions. Number 1, is there any government money based on this drought, whether it's state or federal, that is going to be able, that you guys could possibly acquire as matching funds? Is this or that? Number 1 for the trucks. And also, is there money available to the homeowners from the government? Because it doesn't bring us the water to our house yet.
True.
Okay, so maybe some of us can afford $5,000 a year over our property taxes, but we're not going to be able to afford $15,000 a week to get water. Because back then, what was provided to us then was, and if I remember, the home we bought in 2003, 2004, I actually, when we signed, we gave up the well rights if county water came in.
Sure, within a relatively short range. Most of the time, you're going to get, whoever the land use authority is going to try and get you to annex into that, that water provider in order to provide that water. It's just kind of an unusual case here where you have this kind of isolated community that's considerably a long ways away from potential sources of water other than the groundwater that exists here. With regards to your question, the costs that you're talking about are very significant, costs because you have this distribution system that really nobody knows exactly what it's going to cost you to try and line it out. You need to be shovel ready. Essentially, they have to be ready to build today, not 5 years from now, 10 years from now, other types of things. One of the big challenges that this community has is they have no structure per se, no governmental structure that would allow you to move forward. In other words, that's where the CSD or however you want to put that together needs to happen. And then you can move forward.
Kind of getting to that, what would the cost be, or would they even be any different if they chose to annex into the existing county water district in Acton? Does that change it at all in any way?
Well, it certainly avails themselves of the infrastructure that the county's already prepared and or has available now. Undoubtedly, I don't know specifically about the infrastructure they have in Acton and how it can be extended. Undoubtedly, it would need to be reinforced and expanded in order to bring it to this area. But
it's something to build off.
It would be something to build off of. The other thing too is if you're looking at a recharge project as opposed to a delivery to individual homes, that's much easier to accomplish because water systems work on a peak. You know, we all go into our peak morning and then kind of levels off, and then kind of at night, and you know, about 8 or 9 o'clock, you know, pumps come off and you fill up the reservoirs and you're ready for the next day. So if you have this kind of system, you can work off peak, fill in tanks, other types of things, and then allow those to be drained during time. So you can, it's a way to maximize the use of existing infrastructure to the maximum extent possible. You know, we, 15,000, we charge, our summer rate is $450 an acre foot. So that's 326,000 gallons for $400. So, you know,
It's about $20.
yeah, it's pretty small number, you know.
So basically,
No.
go ahead. Yes, go
I'm
ahead.
not sure exactly when. Within the last year, there was something before the Board of Supervisors called Clean Water, Clean Beaches, and yeah, another new fee. But in that, one of the things that was promised was money to unincorporated areas to do things like studies, and I'm thinking in terms of hydrogeology for a recharge project. Is there no state money for?
Here's the part, in Irwin, which was a takeoff from State Water Regional Quality Control Board to distribute the $7 billion that was granted in Prop 65, is that right?
Prop 50, Prop 84.
Prop 84, okay. So they formed these different groups to figure how the money was going to be distributed to the different areas. And we're in the Santa Clara Riverbed area, along with parts of Agua. Again, it's because we don't have a governmental setup. They have this money. This money is available, but it has to be shovel ready, and it has to meet all their criteria. Which basically what they said was, we can fund a project after you've already paid for it as a community, and then we'll come in and we'll pay 50% of what the costs were. But it has to be more or less a done deal. And obviously, Department of Public Works, Castaic Lake Water Agency, Valencia Water, New York County Water, Flood Control District, they were all there because they have these projects on the board already. And of course, the paperwork is monumental that you have to fill out, and the supervisorial portion of it, and as far as the details, I mean, it's astronomical. And so, because here we are, I will say we're all private citizens, and we don't really have this bond between us all, where we have one. I mean, the town council is just mirroring the voices that we're hearing from the meetings. We're not an agency that can say, we voted on, this is what's going to happen. So if we were that type of a community, then we would have access to some of this funding. But the only way I can see it's going to happen, that I think people would be agreeable with, would be some form of a mutual water company where everybody is a shareholder that's either based on ownership of a parcel, or how many acres, or how many homes, or however. But so that's why
first you need to do the background work, because I like the recharge idea, but who's going to do the hydrology?
Well, that's it. And the funds are available. But here's the other part of it is that your well is private and confidential. Okay, they can't just go in and pull up everybody, come knock on your door and say, tell me how deep your well is. They can't knock on our door and say, give me the records for all the wells that you service.
But I thought when a well was dug, it had to be filed with the
It
county,
is,
and that's not public?
But no, it's not public. It's still private and confidential.
But they're making a map showing all the new wells that are being dug,
But no details as to the quantity, the quality, the depth.
Just position. There's oftentimes there's well drill
And in order to do a study, you're gonna have to get that information, and
That's all
knowing this community, how easy is that gonna be?
Yeah, that's the challenge. It's gonna be
You
more,
don't need every well
It-
to
it-
do
it-
hydrogeology.
if everybody's well went totally dry, it would be no problem at all.
Wait till
I
next year.
think- I think our main intent in inviting Dwayne here was to get up to speed, you know, have there been any changes, is there new funding? What vision do you have, things of that nature, so that, let's say we go through 5 more years of 2 inches a year rainfall, and they still have water. And then, it's gonna become very, hey, this is what we have to do, you know, we have no choice. And
Yeah,
so-
and it's unfortunate, sometimes it takes really good prices for everybody to get together.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
a problem has to get bad enough before it can be solved. I think the idea, if you can do it, recharge the groundwater, that's a great idea. It really is a great.
To me, I think that's something that might work, but who knows?
Yeah,
And-
yeah.
And how do we find out? I mean, do we just start lining up the water?
Yeah, you know,
trucks?
what happens with most grant funding or any kind of funding that you have, you need a government entity or a nonprofit, you know, entity that will apply for the deal, and, you know, so that's where
Yeah.
you're gonna have to
Well,
wrestle with that
if we
to
could
get
get
it.
someone who was willing to do an experiment to see if this could work, that would be ideal, you know? So, anyway,
The reason I
we're
brought
just,
up clean water, clean beaches is because it specifically said unincorporated, grants to unincorporated areas. And I was wondering how they would do that, you know?
I know they were gonna take our money.
Yeah, that part I was sure.
So are
about.
they.
They were gonna take our money.
They're wondering
by
that too.
giant, you
They
know,
really didn't know how to.
No.
Mr. President.
And that's why the whole thing's on hold.
And I think they just piggybacked on top of what these other movements were. In other words, with Prop 80, they all pretty much say the same thing, but very little gets done. Because when you get into it, you discover it's not just a matter of filling out an application and saying, send me the money. It's a matter of going through all these different studies by engineering firms. And they have all these, all this grading system.
You have an application and a series of documents that you gotta prepare that allows them to grade against everybody else.
Yeah.
Process, very good.
Yeah, it's quite a process. Yes, one more question.
I'm on the special water assessment that comes down Escondido, not Sierra Highway.
Yeah.
And we were told if we got water trucks, we could go up to Palmdale where the railroad tracks are and get our water and haul it down here. Now, you guys, and then they told us that we couldn't have any pipes come beyond Red Rover Mine Road because it stops right there. They don't have a big enough pipe to bring water down. My question is, how many people in Agua Dulce are on this special water assessment on their tax bills?
That's exactly what I think that's AVEK.
Is that, well, that's AVEK, but none of my neighbors are on it. I mean, it's just gonna, it's a
There
hit
is
and
no
miss.
real rhyme or reason.
There's just a line on the map that they made back in.
Actually, it hopscotches parcels. It's not like a swath that goes through. It's
Yeah,
like,
so if you're
They
paying
have-
for it, you have a right to it.
I think you can go, now do you have maps online that show?
We do have maps that showing the boundaries.
I think they do, you can actually go
Well,
online.
I know, we got added on because 12 people signed a petition, and they could have 12 or less, and they didn't have to have a vote for Agua Dulce.
Yeah.
So now, when we hired a lawyer to get off of AVEK, 10 years ago or so, it's been longer than that. But, we've been paying for 35 years. Anyway, what was I going to say? Now we have over 100 people on our end of town. You guys, it goes down to Doretha Daniels' house, because I talked it over with her, because she was here then. And the people over there voted with the Acton people. It was an Acton vote, it was not an Agua Dulce vote. So can you get that information now to see how many people is paying for this special water tax on their tax bills? Because That's gonna be in addition to your monthly charges. You're gonna have you're gonna have that on your income tax every year. And when we first moved here, it was $1,000 for AVEK. And now it's gone down because it was, you know, the prices was, you know, very expensive then, your bonds and everything. Now it's down to 7 cents.
Right.
Okay, but I'm really curious, how much of Agua Dulce is not covered by this special
Well, just
assessment?
by raising hands, I know I'm on it.
You're-
How many here are on AVEK, and Ed's on it, Joey's on it,
Yeah.
Well, the old house is.
John's on it? Okay.
Yeah, but
So
you're
we're
at,
paying for something
you're
we're
not
not gonna
on
see
Does it
But now,
actually say
okay,
AVEK?
now here's the thing, here's the thing. If we were to do something, whatever group we're gonna put together to get this recharge well project experiment going, they all have to become members of AVEK. In other words, they have to be annexed, or not annexed, but they have to be bondholders. or
No,
something.
they'd have to annex into the district,
Okay,
yeah, so they can pay the property.
so here's what happens. If you've paid $30,000 in over the last 30 years, and I haven't paid a thing, I have to come up to equal what you've already paid in. So in essence, it isn't like that money is for nothing. It's for nothing if the water never comes. But if it comes, every cent that you've put into it will be equal by anybody else who is going to benefit from the pipe. So in a way, yes, it's hard to see the benefit, but the benefit is there because then you wouldn't have to pay the amount to come up to where you would, in other words, it wouldn't be something new on your tax bill because it's already been on your tax bill. Is that right? Okay, that's the way I understand.
Yeah, right.
So-
You would have a truing up of costs, so everybody has equal benefit.
Yeah, so the ones that just get into it right now, they don't get a free ride for the last 30 years. They have to pay equal to the amount that you've already
from the
paid.
beginning of the bonds
we had
in
a
the
water
70s.
Yes.
So if I'm not in it,
All right. Well, thank you, Dwayne. I appreciate it. I appreciate you making the effort to come out here and get us up to speed.
Anytime just wanted to give you this information, it's a little bit on community services districts and the rules about mutual water companies.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you. Tons of it.
Don't waste water.
Now, we can get 20 people to agree on the same thing, we're looking good.